I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello, and welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I'm Kalil, and with me today is the $12 to my savings account.
I'm the last that you've got?
You are all that I have.
Oh, no. 2020 was horrible to you.
Hey, but with inflation, that's almost like $24.
That is, we're out of inflation, buddy. You're worse off than James right now. How does that feel?
No, it feels like I have experienced Checkmate, episode 20 of Twin Peaks.
Has he just been stealing gas this whole time? Where, is he like just a few miles out, or? That's concerning because, again, he's out of money and $12 seems good for him.
Maybe, okay, so he said savings account. Maybe he's been using like a checking account.
Okay.
Yeah. He could have multiple accounts.
He still needs the $12.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, maybe he has had other money for the gas and then he ran out. So he's like, all right, well, time for my backup reserves of $12.
Okay.
Let those kick in.
James is going to die in the woods.
This was episode 20, also known as Checkmate, written by Harley Payton and directed by Todd Holland.
It's really called Checkmate.
It's really called Checkmate.
I love it and I hate it.
One thing that I love and hate, but mostly hate, is that I forgot to mention something on a previous episodes of the podcast.
Oh.
It wasn't the last one, but it was one before.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how I managed to, like, forget it for this long.
There's a lot of things that go on in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Forgive yourself.
And out of Twin Peaks, to be fair. And there was this big old picture. If I knew dimensions, I would tell you the dimensions of Laura Palmer sitting on Benjamin Horne's desk-a-rooney back when he was showing the footage of himself.
Yeah, you were showing me that before the podcast. It was about the size of his head, so head-sized portrait.
One head-sized portrait. If you know photo dimensions, that size.
It is the size of a Ben Horne head.
And I believe, if I had done my research, I'd know for sure, but I believe, and that's getting me most of the way here, is belief, that the photo we saw of Laura Palmer in Benjamin Horne's possession at the beginning of the show when he was talking with Audrey was like, I don't know, like the kind you would see like on a desk, like a little tiny, not wallet sized, but like, you know, regular sized. But this was head sized.
Okay.
The three sizes of photograph, right?
Yes.
Wallet, regular, head.
Yes.
And so the fact that he just randomly has this gigantuan picture of Laura Palmer on his desk, that oddly looks almost like it was a screenshot from the home video that we had from James and Donna and Laura's motorcycle picnic trip.
Oh.
So I don't know if they got one of those developed or if it's just a coincidence that it kind of looks like that. But I just think it's interesting. We'll get more into that sort of stuff with Benjamin Horne at a later time, I think, because I believe there's going to be a situation to bring it up during one of the books. And I'm not saying more than that. But
we get to go into Ben Horne's special private picture collection in the books?
Maybe.
Oh, boy.
Ooh, I don't know if we want to know half those photos. They're going to be really incriminating.
Probably.
Probably very incriminating and very uncomfortable.
He did love her, but we don't know how far that love went.
Well, we do know something of that because Audrey did ask him if he ever slept with Laura, and he indicated yes. So how deep is his love for Laura Palmer?
I don't want to see the photos.
But this photo was fine. It was just a nice headshot, head-sized. But I just wanted to mention that because among all his possessions in his desk, I think it's notable that that was there because it kind of reflects what's on his mind, especially given the next episode. He talks about how the arrangement of the furniture in the room is so important, and he started organizing everything that Laura Palmer's picture was there as he was watching childhood footage of himself during the groundsbreaking ceremony. Just seems a bit significant.
It seems so, but at the same time, I don't know if Ben Horne is going to be okay. Whatever was in his desk, I don't know where it is right now, but there's new setup for Ben Horne. He's got a fancy new office display. He's got his workers helping him out with his new hobby.
You know, I mentioned it a couple podcasts ago, check on your friends, make sure they're doing okay, if you haven't heard from him in a while. Ben needs to be checked up on.
Yeah, check on your friends.
So Ben needs a little bit of a checkup. He's decided, as many people do when they reach rock bottom, that they're going to reenact the Civil War. It's a common coping mechanism.
Okay.
You know?
Let's say hypothetically it is a common coping mechanism. What side of the war would you put yourself on?
The Union side, because those not, again, familiar with American history, the Confederacy South, which is what Benjamin aligns with, was the side that was in favor of enslaving people. and using them for labor and like separating their families and, you know, keeping slave women that they had children with. And then the children would become slaves in a perpetual cycle of, you know, violence and prejudice. And Ben Horne chose the losing evil side.
Oh, but they're winning,
Perhaps
remember?
was self-aware. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, Ben's convinced that his side is going to win. It's just, again, self-awareness. He's picking the evil, bad side that lost. But no, if I were personally reenacting the Civil War in order to boost my own morale and try to get myself out of a creative slump and a lifestyle slump, I would prefer to be the Union, who, you know, won and has the moral right in this situation. But anyway, we see Lucille, our brand new character.
Runs out of the office, a little bit traumatized, holding on to a big old set of drums, some drumsticks, a whole bunch of documents scattered about, and wearing what seems to be a bandage and or headband with a red spot. Hopefully something that was included on the bandage and not made recently.
We see her carrying a bottle of ketchup.
Or hot sauce.
Probably ketchup.
I think it's more orangey.
You're orangey. I think it's. See, the listener can't judge. I'm looking at you, and I can judge that you look a little orangey.
No,
you're closer to hot sauce than ketchup right now. Like in terms of the hues you're giving off. So anyway, I think it was ketchup, hot sauce, whatever. But she's carrying it, and she passes Audrey, who's like, "Well, what's going on?" And then just kind of looks down at her condiment bottle and just runs off.
And just for the listeners to know out there, the condiment I'm closest to is horseradish. But speaking of horseradish, of these sort of claims, she's not going to be okay. No one is going to be okay in the Great Northern. Everything is going to burn down horribly by the end, I am sure.
Well, his office has already seen better days. Giant mounds of dirt on the floor with plastic figurines, the boxes of which are just scattered on the outskirts of the mounds. Like, clearly it was just recently put together, but very immaculately put together, I must add. Presumably, Lucille was helping in those endeavors to start up the war. Ben is even adopting a slight Southern accent into his voice, which I'm not going to attempt to imitate Ben doing a Southern accent, but it's there. And, you know, he's over here shouting that he needs more time. It's an important day. He's shouting for General Lee, and he says, "Old Jeb has come in," and we get the flute, like, kicks in right at that part. It's real good. It's a real good flute. Real good moment. At this point, Audrey knows it's an emergency, so she calls the most reliable person she could think of to help out Benjamin Horne, who is...
good old Jerry boy, Jerry Horne, the man with the sandwich.
I knew you would know the answer to that, Professor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Jerry Horne is presumably on the way. We haven't seen him in quite a while.
Now, mind you, that's the first person she calls. She also does check in with Dr. Jacoby.
Who is coming back from Hawaii, hopefully.
He's already back from Hawaii. We've seen him at the funeral. He's going to be back in tomorrow to check in on Ben.
You know what? I'm curious in the creative, like in the writing side point, if they had already been planning on bringing Jacoby and Jerry back, if they were looking for a reason. I'm curious, like, what came first, chicken or egg situation? Was it, okay, well, Ben needs help. Who's going to help him? Oh, wait, we got these characters we haven't done anything with in like 10 episodes. Or was it the other way around where it's like, well, we really need to get Jerry and Jacoby back in. How about Ben have a mental health crisis?
I think that I think Ben having the mental health crisis was the big idea, and both Jerry as well as Dr. Jacoby are just the most fitting tools for the current situation.
And the current situation is that Ben is standing on top of his fireplace, holding a sword, talking to Bobby.
Yep, and he hands over the sword to Bobby, and then asks him to give it back in a means of surrendering.
He has suffered an ignoble defeat, and he accepts his unconditional surrender. Bobby, instead of surrendering like a proper, defeated general.
Yeah, I'm going to go talk to President Lincoln. Can't keep the president waiting. So, yeah, I'll get back to you on the whole surrender thing.
Which leaves Ben even more confused than he was before, if that's even possible. Just kind of standing there to his fireplace with a sword, unsure what's going on. Wait, no, Bobby had the sword at this point, right?
Yeah, Bobby walked out with the sword.
He just took the sword.
He just took the sword.
Also, this is a small thing. Benjamin Horne has been known to smoke cigars for quite a while, but these looked a little different to my eye. I don't know if they're supposed to be more period accurate, or else it's just the lighting and I'm going crazy.
Tell us more about the period accurate cigars. What did cigars look like around then?
Older. Because
it looks like an aged cigar.
Well, it looks like a shorter and almost more gray tinted, almost, matching the Confederacy gray. So I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but the cigars look like you might have switched out brands specifically for this occasion. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, good cosplay.
I mean, I just mentioned he has not the same cigars. Like, he actually has, like, a collection of cigars.
I think Benjamin Horn is a man of class and would buy in bulk the kind he likes and be very picky about his cigars. That's my sense.
So what, did, like, the cigars now join the Confederacy and that's why they look different to you? Because that's by the logic of your bulk.
Well, I also think maybe that Benjamin Horn gets his cigars through his business transactions, because I feel like that's a thing you do when you meet people like, oh, yes, here, cigars.
Yes, Great Northern, okay, you're booked yourself for a 2-bedroom room. Yeah, that'll be 8 cigars, please.
Well, I was thinking of as more shadier.
Oh, okay.
Shadowier business arrangements at the One-Eyed Jacks.
Well, unfortunately, now that Leland is gone, he can't really get the extra collateral from the business transactions, which I imagine are paid specifically in cigars.
So maybe they're just really old cigars that he had to, like, dust up for the situation, which is also appropriate.
Oh,
I don't know.
boy.
Do cigars work like wine where they're finely aged?
They are.
I mean, they're gonna kill your lungs no matter what you do, but like,
I'm pretty sure that I do not smoke myself, but I am pretty sure it's just dried plants which you burn. So
does it matter how old they are?
I don't think so.
I'm gonna claim
burn.
ignorance about smoking cigars.
I'm going to claim ignorance as well because...
Well, we're a good podcast to talk about. I look forward to our spin-off podcast, the Wonderful and Strange Cigar Cast.
I look forward to our I don't think we reach to our audience for that. I think it's just the Wonderful and Strange Don't Know What We're Talking About podcast, where we find a subject we have no information on.
Yes. Yeah. Then we get, speaking of no information, speaking of someone who doesn't know their information, Bobby comes out and tries to talk to Audrey. And he's putting the moves on again, like we've seen in the past couple episodes, calls Audrey baby, at which point she kind of pushes him away a little bit and says, don't call me baby. Yeah. So it seems like we're going to move away from that idea of the last couple episodes. I don't know if that was a creative writing decision of like, let's drop this idea, or if it's more just like, Audrey was playing him along before and now is dropping the act. Either way, it seems like a change in tone between the two of them.
No, she leaned out of things such as the kiss. I think that as long as Bobby has his uses, she can like lead along a string, but she's going to pull the string out of the way before he ends up catching it, like a little cat toy.
What did Audrey think she was going to get out of him in the first place, though?
And I do not know. Currently, well, in truth, she did end up with some photos that helped out Cooper.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Maybe there is something that she knows or is planning with all this.
The idea of using Bobby to use her father to help Cooper.
Yeah.
Perfectly clear idea.
Well, in the end, like, Ben's not going to send Audrey out to get these photos. Like, he paid a lot of money to try to finagle her out. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that trying to get someone in and get someone easily manipulated would be beneficial for Audrey.
I suppose so. And Bobby is easily manipulated. Although I do like his couple of lines when he first sees Audrey. He says that he's got bad news, he's got good news. And the bad news is that Audrey's father bought a condo in Flip City. And the good news is that he's about to win the Civil War.
You see?
He's got a way with words, that Bobby. It's about all he's really got going for him right now. But,
oh, yeah.
And then the last person we see encounter Ben in this episode is Catherine. Mm-hmm. Wearing what I can only really compare to like your very generic Native American looking like imagery.
Okay.
But it feels like what someone would have is like a throw blanket with like it's vaguely Native American, not in a way that actually probably has any meaning whatsoever. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But it just feels like the colors and design, it's like, oh yeah, it's very lodgy. And so she kind of wears that, which I think is of course on purpose considering Civil War era situation we're dealing with here. I
don't know how that may involve. Personally, I was hoping for...
I don't know either.
So it makes sense, but you just don't know. I was hoping for Tor Tomorrow cosplay again, but...
That would be good. That would be really good. Ben accuses her immediately of coming there to gloat, to celebrate his demise. So it seems like even though he's doing this whole Civil War shtick, he has enough awareness to know that Catherine beat him in the real world.
Yeah.
He says, you defeated me as I have defeated General Meade, which was referring to what he called Bobby earlier.
Yeah.
Catherine admits, yes, I did come here to gloat. I came here to bury you so deep that future generations would uncover you and exhibit your remains and do not feed.
Yep.
Do not trust.
What was the Latin for that?
Do you have it?
I do have it, one moment. because it was slimy rat bastard Americanus.
I wonder what the deep meaning could be behind that
Do not
name.
feed, do not trust. So not only is he a fossil that gets dug up to be referred to this, but still do not give him anything.
Well, and as she says this, she starts sensually running her fingers through it.
No. Rub her fingers.
Rubbing would be like a noogie,
genie lamp.
Like a noogie.
Like a genie lamp, Ben Horn's head is rubbed.
And I kind of want to know your thoughts, Professor, on the scene that unfolded after this, because we get one of the many kisses in this episode.
There's so many kisses.
We'll talk about it, but I counted at least 6.
Oh boy.
6 different people, smooches, couplings, whatever have you. And this is one of them where Catherine basically says, despite everything I know about you, I find myself here with you, wanting you. And even Ben's like, you can't be serious. She says, I want you, Ben. Horrifying as it may seem, I can't escape it. You make my body hum. Kiss me, generally. And this, like, the sexy saxophone music's playing in the background to try to make this more alluring. And Ben, as he's, like, burying his face into her, is like, on the victor. So,
yep, his head is buried inside of her bosom underneath the jacket as he's on way to victory.
Did you want to say...
My thoughts are... What end are we hoping to reach with that? Like, I was thinking maybe Catherine was tying herself more to Pete, but maybe she feels something closer to Ben, or maybe she hopes to gain something even more?
Yeah, there's one of two ways, right? Either Catherine means it, or she's using it as a tool. Yeah. So if she means it, that raises the question of, like, what? Stockholm Syndrome or what? And then if she, like, is doing it as a trick, it's like, well, what else do you have to take from him? Or else are you just trying to mock him?
I mean, in the end...
Or is he just a good smoocher and you're just here for a good time?
Yeah, that also is a possibility.
Yeah. She doesn't really mean any of what she's saying. She just wants a little bit of that physicality. I don't know.
I'm going to lean on to Catherine's good old phrase of if we've been lying to ourselves our whole... a lot of our adult lives, why start being honest now?
Because if it is honest, if she does mean that, I think the part of me inside is just kind of screaming out that I don't like that choice, that it doesn't feel right for the characters. Mm-hmm. For Catherine especially, it feels like it weakens her a little bit.
I don't know.
But we need to see where they go with this.
Yeah, I don't know. I can imagine Catherine being in her more seductive prime. She might be more so desiring something physically, and that would hurt a few things, yes.
And speaking of seductive whispers... We're in outer space. Stars are shining in the sky. And we get a male voice whispering, Cooper. And that seductive voice belonging to, as the subtitles say, male voice.
Yes.
Totally unknown.
Male voice.
And then all of a sudden, like a radioactive symbol. Kind of
flies through the cosmos. Is that
what you thought it was too, is the radioactive triangles?
It is shaped very much like it, and it doesn't help that the color of it looks very similar to the yellow.
And then flames. The flames.
Yep, like a biohazard comes through, and then we see beyond the flames, Briggs. And as the flames part and dissipate around him, he is sitting in the middle of a forest.
On a throne, pretty much, right? Like a stone throne. It's a really cool image.
Yes, as both Doc Hayward as well as Cooper speak to him through this strange mind palace of his.
Right, which is either a metaphor or like that's kind of a spiritual truth at the moment. Who knows?
Yes. I mean, Briggs knows.
I don't think Briggs knows based on the way he's talking.
No, because remember what he says about his memory. He basically knows all of his memory, save for a white owl large enough to cloud his memory. So unless this is specifically where the white owl will cloud, I think he's pretty in tune with his mind.
I will again disagree, but let's get there as we get there.
Yes.
So he says that he remembers stepping from the flames, a vague shape in the dark, then nothing, until he found himself standing by the cold remains of their campfire 2 days later. So flames, dark shape, could be the dark shape of like the cloaked figure we saw before he disappeared. Could be something else entirely. We don't know. And then again, the 2 days later passing. Now, presumably at some point he's wearing his different outfit. He's wearing the like aviator outfit when he returns, right?
Yes.
And he mentions that he doesn't really need Dr. Hayward's new amnesia breaking techniques because his memories are immune to regression. So Major Briggs, either through training or just natural gift, is someone who normally has very good memory. Like, pretty much impenetrable. So the fact that he's having these troubles. It's something that even just normal science cannot explain. Everything is known to him, yet somehow beyond his reach, he says. So,
Save for
the
a
giant
white owl large enough to cloud his memory.
Did it say a white owl?
Yes.
I think it just said a giant owl.
No, I'm pretty sure it says white owl.
I'm pretty sure it's a giant.
There's an owl.
So I think we're both right in different ways. It just depends on where we want to lean. As you said, everything is known to him. I would emphasize, though, that it's somehow beyond his reach. Aside from the owl, everything else is pretty murky, to the point that when he returns from this stupor, he basically starts repeating to himself a lot of stuff. Like, he's obviously going through some things where he's talking about he knows the information's classified, but at this point, keeping secrets feels meaningless. That perhaps there are sources of information so important that they transcend the human need to conspire. Information of such weight that pertains not. And then he like pauses, he stammers, "Oh God, is this meant for the soul, my soul?" And he's like clearly struggling with these ideas.
Yes.
So that's where I don't think he's fully aware of what's going on, in the sense that I think he's really struggling for probably more than he ever has in his life, or at least in a long time, grappling with ideas that are shaking him to his foundation. As a man that's very principled, he's questioning those foundations right now.
I think that he knows well enough of his own mind and his own mind palace. It's just that being met with this new conflict and what he should share despite his position is definitely a larger conflict for himself. So I think that's an area we may agree to disagree. One area I'm curious of is, how large does an owl have to be to cloud one's memory? How big do you think that owl is? Because that was specifically how large the owl was described to be.
So this is where we get a little weird, and I'm going to dance around some things.
Yay!
In some of the Twin Peaks book material, there is more discussion on very large owls. And those who've read the Twin Peaks books will know what I'm talking about. Those who have not,
I look forward to.
We recommend you. I recommend you listen to them. Professor hasn't read them yet.
I want to.
We're going to. So, if in case you were listening and weren't sure, after we finish the main show, we are going to start looking through some of the book material. The book I'm talking about here with the giant owl stuff will get included. So we will be addressing this many, many months from now. But I do want to mention that there is more stuff that could be linked to the idea of giant owls that even is in Twin Peaks source material. But that's so far away that to answer your question more jokingly, it would have to be big. There you go. That's my answer.
My memory's easily clouded, so I think I just need a palm-sized owl myself.
Well, we know the owl from Winnie the Pooh is like the smartest character in that like book.
Yeah, but he doesn't seem like the type to cloud memory.
No, but if Owl from Winnie the Pooh turned to the dark side and used his intellect, his vast prowess, for malevolence rather than benevolence, do you not think Owl is capable of finding ways to obscure the memory? What if the reason that, Winnie the Pooh has so many struggles with his life about forgetting things and, his basic struggle for honey, it's because Owl is trying to recreate the myth of Sisyphus by constantly plunging Pooh down to the bottom, constantly in need for honey, but constantly being swatted away by the bees, and this constant, ebb and flow of Pooh's struggles are all a big giant Greek tragedy that's replaying in Owl's efforts.
The only way I'm going to respond to that is that Owl sits on a tree that looks down upon the rest of the 100-acre wood. So let's leave it at that, shall we?
It's all but the dream of Owl.
Yes, but
are you familiar with Project Blue Book, Professor?
Cooper is. It's about studying UFOs. That was officially ended at one point, but
no, genuinely, are you familiar with that concept? It's a real world thing.
Vaguely, very, very vaguely.
It is a thing in our world, and in our world, it was disbanded in the 60s. But in the Twin Peaks world, and perhaps also in our world,
it was unofficially continued.
Cue X-Files theme here.
I have not seen X-Files.
Well, David Duchovny's in that, and he's in this, so...
Cool.
So supposedly it continues, and that Briggs is someone in unofficial capacity still continuing Project Blue Book, like 20-some years afterward. And they're searching for a place called the White Lodge. But before he can expand upon this detail, so tantalizingly presented for us, these agents come in and escort him out of the room.
Yes, Colonel Riley wants to see you.
And, Harry's a little bit concerned. Do you want to go with the shady government people? And Major Briggs is like, yes, I do. He's going to go forward. This is a mild little side tangent, and it's one of the things we do in this podcast where I don't know if the listener's going to be all familiar with the source material, but even if you're not, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I'll explain it anyway. There's a very popular video game called Final Fantasy VII. Recently got a remake done of it, or at least part of it.
Never heard of it.
And super famous RPG game, and it's very story focused. And there's a thing in the game called the Promised Land. And the basic idea is that in Final Fantasy VII, it's set like in a kind of modern, kind of terrible city environment at the beginning called Midgar, where this corporation basically is trying to use shadowy, bad ways of finding out information about this Promised Land, this sort of special place that this group of people called the Ancients know about, that supposedly is going to have like unlimited resources. Well, the Shinra Corporation wants to get that place for basically the game equivalent of oil, right? They want to go there and suck the Promised Land dry of its resources, whereas the Ancients in their culture looked at the Promised Land as a place of peace and happiness. And among the fan base of Final Fantasy VII, to this day, because that game came out like 97, I think, to this day, there's still a lot of debate. What is the Promised Land? Is it real? Is it a physical place or a spiritual place in the mind? Does it just mean the afterlife? We don't really know. Like, there's different disagreements. But I'm reminded a lot of the Promised Land when we're talking about the White Lodge at this point in the show. Now, I can't say what ends up happening in the future, but with how the White Lodge is being discussed now, it reminds me a lot where the Ancients, you have the sort of Hawk talking about the beliefs of, I believe, his people, the Nez Perce, and the believing that the White Lodge is this place of like pureness, and the Black Lodge is like the shadow counterpart, and you have to pass through the Black Lodge to get to the White Lodge and all that sort of stuff. And then you have the government's interest in it. And my immediate like hippie in me is like, don't trust the man. The U.S. government can't be trusted. They're just going to take it for the oil, the White Owl Lodge oil. See, I built all that credibility like I knew where I was going with it, and then I just did that. Just ripped the wrong Jenga piece out.
You managed to land back into our reality, such as Briggs did in your aviator outfit. So
I don't know if there's a huge takeaway, but I do think there's something almost archetypal that isn't very often used, but I've seen it kind of, again, like in Final Fantasy VII, of sort of a mystical, spiritual place of ancient lore that the sort of modern government or modern business trying to get access to. I feel like there's a little bit of I've seen other things do that before. I don't even know if that's a trope or that's a thing, but I just find it interesting to think about that it isn't only in Twin Peaks.
Now, mind you, like, these people are part of a larger government body, but unofficially continuing, who is taking the lead on that?
Right.
So
mysteries abound.
And
obviously it weighs on Major Briggs' conscience because he's almost to the point of spilling like international secrets. Because the way that he's being spoke about earlier, that his disappearance has like matters that would make the Cold War seem like a bad case of the sniffles.
Love that line.
It's a really good
much.
line. That would imply that Major Briggs being willing to talk about what happened here with the White Lodge to Cooper and Truman and Hawk in the room, him trusting those people enough with this kind of information, that's pretty big.
It is pretty big, but so far we see that they're just trustworthy folk, you know? You're in the middle of a trial, you decide to have a few drinks with the guys, and they decide the outcome. They're just trustworthy people.
I honestly think there's a lot of great Twin Peaks podcasts out there, many of which have like great guest stars and incredible commentary. What we've got to our claim is we talk about the Yukon Sucker Punches and the whole justice system of Clinton Sternwood probably more than any other podcast.
That's good.
I think, our claim to fame here. The whole thing with Major Briggs, I really enjoy this scene.
Yeah.
From the way it opens up with the stars, it harkens back to the original version of the story that the Cooper's name had been repeated from deep space. Well, then we were told that it had actually been through the forest. So it's interesting that we get the images conflated with one another. We get the space and then the forest right after. So I think that's pretty interesting. The radioactive symbol now is tattooed on Briggs's neck. More mysteries, more confusion. And the whole scene ends with kind of a sudden cut to the sprinkler dripping with this intense music that was playing in the background. Very, very creepy. Professor, what did you think of the dripping sprinkler? What did it make you think of?
I think that it alludes to Bob.
Okay, you're on the same page as I am.
Yes, because that was like the last instance of Bob and Leland and so on, just like slamming about before the sprinklers went off and slowly murdered.
Before Bob slammed in the back of that Dragula. to quote the Rob Zombie song.
I don't know Rob Zombie. Anyway.
So, Professor, what do you think of the Major Briggs radioactive symbol, Bob? Any like theories on any of this?
My assumption is that either A, he potentially had a good or ill encounter with the one known as Bob. The symbol might tie somewhere with Bob. The voice may tie in with Bob, or where he is heading, and potentially Colonel Riley may have an encounter with Bob. Any of these could be a potential link. It's just whether or not it is the before or after effect of what Briggs is involved with that will have to deal with Bob. Because otherwise, that sprinkler only has so much to do with much. The sprinkler water, how they notice it, is that it drops on the recent like, this picture developed really freaking fast. Whatever camera Doc Hayward has, it's amazing. But this developed picture of the little scar on the back of Briggs's neck gets a little drops of that little sprinkler water.
Spooky.
Spooky dookie.
What else is spooky in this episode is the involvement of Leo Johnson.
No, I think it's just the usual normal things, you know, Leo Johnson trying to be fed and so on, getting a little food on his face.
A little bit of that red jam, kind of dripping, a little drippy.
Little drippy.
Professor, quite a while ago, you were speculating about the slasher kind of vibes going off from Leo Johnson. And it seems like we're finally getting somewhere with that.
Yes,
it took a while.
Yes, we are. Let's lead into that. So, every slasher needs a little bit of tension built up.
Invitation to Love is back on the air. Now, granted, we didn't get to see it, and it wasn't really that much. And it was kind of obscure to the audio, but we open up with Shelley Johnson with Invitation to Love, and she's still watching it. Mm-hmm. So make of that what you will in sort of like a metatextual, metaphorical way if you want, or you can just say, it's the one thing that's on the air in Twin Peaks. That's what you watch if you live in Twin Peaks. But the soap opera lives on. And things ain't so happy here in the household. We have a verbal back and forth between Shelley and Bobby. Bobby, who is claiming it's his big break. He's Benjamin Horne's golden boy. And he ain't coming back. You know? He doesn't need to clean. He doesn't need to do anything around this house. Yeah. He's got better things to do than take care of Leo.
Yeah, from the way that he said it, I think it's leaning on the sense that he's probably just going to get less and less involved with Shelley. So it could be either the sense that he's just going to be leaving for good. He doesn't want to involve himself with Shelley that much longer. It could just be for that night, like, no, I'm not taking my turn and so on. I think it leans more in the former than the latter. Mainly because, as I've said 20 times before, Bobby's just a leech. Whatever's the bigger game, he'll go for it. And right now, Shelley's just going to be something that'll be a drip feed away from him.
Yeah, and Shelley, for her part, doesn't really take it. Like, when basically Bobby insinuates that she's got nothing better to do than take care of Leo, she slaps him, kind of shouts at him as he's leaving out the door, and then it goes to Leo, who's just recently been fed with red jam dripping from his mouth like feral blood, just kind of chilling in the background. And that's where it just kind of lets that sit. And this episode is so busy. Like, there's so much going on. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing or an in-between thing. Mm-hmm. I guess I kind of want your feel of that, Professor.
I feel tired after watching it.
Absolutely. Like, even taking the notes on it. And, like, I have about the same number of pages, I guess, as usual. There's just so many different things that are making little inches forward. And there's enough going on that we have to talk about everything. I make it sound like I'm not complaining about doing the podcast.
Yeah,
it's a very busy episode.
It's a very busy episode. It's like, usually with episodes, we get a few plot points that do have a significant push forward, but it's almost as if everything in Twin Peaks is getting one big old step.
Yeah. And that's interesting. A little draining. I'm glad every episode isn't like this.
Yeah. But
it's not terrible.
Not terrible,
It's not even really bad. It's got a lot of good moments sprinkled in.
However, it seems like the power has been draining around Twin Peaks, as apparently like...
I feel like that's a David Lynch metaphor right there, huh?
There's an explosion in two locations. Do you remember both locations?
Yeah, there was apparently some kind of bomb or explosion in the woods. There was one over at the power station and then one at the generator, it sounds like.
Yeah, at the transformer.
Transformer.
Yep. And from the Johnson
robots in disguise.
From the Johnson household, this is causing this very eerie effect where the lights just dim completely and start up again.
As well as the music.
As well as the music, which does not help the situation.
No.
Shelley goes to check in on the bed and just sees the little mechanical toy going off.
A clown.
A little mechanical clown. And then as she kind of tries to approach Leo Johnson's chair, that's when we get the fun facial smile and reaction from Leo, face covered in food and just waiting for Shelly, which we don't know what happens to Shelly.
Yeah, it looks like cake, to harken back to that moment when his face fell in the cake.
Now, mind you, we will be going back to like everything going on with the power later.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning on Leo had something to do with it because Shelly was asleep. Leo could have been doing something in the background.
I think there's one other contender for that.
There is, but
yeah. All in due time.
But regardless, he's standing up, food on his face. Apparently, like, Shelly didn't clean it off, and neither did Leo, so it's a very, like, at one end, horrifying, but on another end, hilarious shot of a man who is just coated and ready to whatever he's going to do.
Could you imagine how terrible that would be to have, like, food stuck in your face for hours?
Like, I can't even stand it for minutes.
It'd be disgusting.
His face must be really freaking sticky.
What do you think of Leo's return?
I think that...
Well, I mean, he's kind of already been here, but...
I think that Leo, I don't know what he's going to do. I think that he is a force of nature that will strike. In what ways, I don't know, but I'm kind of curious if the sudden call us to action was his face being covered and Bobby being left behind. Who's going to believe her?
It has been so long since we've had, like, a walking, talking Leo that the idea of it is just so interesting at this point, isn't it?
And you too can get a walking, talking Leo in time for the holidays, just for 4 easy payments of $299.99.
Or take all your $12 out of your savings account right now and put down a down payment with interest. Speaking of interest, there is some interest in the mind of Dick Tremaine and Andy Brennan into the origins of Little Nicky. And we get this with Dick Tremaine showing up in disguise.
Yep, inside of the police office, like hiding next to the door of Lucy, which, by the way...
What was the way you put that? Dick Tremaine became...
Dick Tracy.
Yeah. I'm not going to steal your joke there. But yeah, he shows up, talks to Andy, just kind of hides himself from Lucy's right at the front door. So it's a real stealth mission.
Yeah, he's trying to also be secretive against Lucy, but he's standing right next to the door with Lucy. Lucy just needs to take a bathroom break to see the very sketchy Dick Tremaine waiting for Andy around the corner. And he's upset that Andy hasn't arrived yet, but Andy was trying to rescue a cat from a tree.
Likely story.
It wasn't a likely story for him. It seemed that Dick Tremaine actually found, like, apparently it was a noble thing that the work is never done for. So at least he can recognize, like, his good deeds.
That's true. See, Dick Tremaine isn't all bad.
Listen,
Anyways,
buddy, if there's mold on my bread for about, like, 80% of the bread, I'm not going to eat it for the
Just
potential
cut off the
20%.
part that's fine. Just eat the part that's fine. Just... just pull the mold off. And
just pull the mold off. Just take off the crust and the rest of the bread, and you got like little munchies.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Feed the cat with it. Anyway, speaking of Dick Tremaine being a perfect, good and intelligent person, they are continuously looking into the origins of Little Nicky, and he has found that all the stuff was sealed. He tried to grease the palms of some old ladies
Which apparently he thinks that we'll just eat out of his hand.
Apparently, according to him, they did, and that was over at Little Helping Hand. But the information about Little Nicky, the records were sent back to the orphanage. And Andy says, we should tell Lucy. Dick's like, no, this is a man's job. Now, I think we have to, it's important to question long-held understandings and beliefs of gender roles and patriarchal values.
Blech.
But can we all agree it is a man's job to investigate orphanage records against the law? That's a man's job. Like, women do not involve in breaking into the orphanages. That's a man's role.
I believe that it is equal opportunity for people to do their misdemeanors and felonies on their own time.
And we find that his orphanage is called Dorrit Home for Boys. And Dick Tremaine says...
RNTT, by the way, double consonants.
Yes. Our operation must continue sub rosa, says Dick Tremaine.
Under the Rose.
Which I was just thinking it was endorsing the metal band from the United States.
No, he's just being... he's being Dick Tremaine, and he's just trying to use little fancy aloof words to make sure, like, hey, let's be sneaky.
Okay, but the Sub Rosa album, More Constant Than the Gods, very good metal album.
I don't listen to your music.
And you know what else we don't do? Lockpick the door, because Andy can just open it.
Yeah, Andy seems to be the most level-headed in this crime scene as like
Apparently I'm the most metal-headed.
Andy goes into the Needleman, if I'm correct.
Nicholas Needleman.
Nicholas Needleman grabs the file, and Andy makes the very smart decision, being like, shouldn't we just like read this in the car? This is just a file. It is not attached to this place. But like Dick is like, no, shush, Andy, I am investigating.
Oh, the plot thickens.
The plot thickens. And then we get another group of brand new characters.
The Brunstons.
The Brunstons, who are seeking out Donnie.
I get so much secondhand embarrassment in situations like this in shows. Do you feel that, Professor, where you're watching these uncomfortable situations and you're like, ugh, it hurts you?
It hurts me, but only because, again, Dick Tremaine is not a smart man.
Little Donnie is
dead.
Dead.
Tired.
I'm afraid little Donnie isn't feeling quite up to snuff.
I imagine it would have come up later. It has come up to snuff because he is snuffing that cocaine. Oh, you know those children. And by cocaine, I mean Coca-Cola. Enjoying that sweet, sweet Coca-Cola and...
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored.
I do like his nickname for Andy, though, calling him Woody. Now, this was ahead of its time because Toy Story hadn't even come out yet.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking Andy, Woody, Toy Story, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it was before Toy Story.
Okay.
In the chronology of film, Twin Peaks is before Toy Story.
The more you know.
So and then it just kind of hard cuts. We don't know what happens the rest of that conversation. Do you imagine how well do you imagine that conversation went about Donnie after it cut from the camera?
Again, Dick Tremaine is handling it, and the way that I interpreted it a few seconds ago, that's how it went. That is the exact conversation.
Oh. Do you think that the conversation between Nadine and Snake went any better? I mean, okay, for one of the two parties, I mean, they got what they wanted out of the conversation.
Why? Just why?
So, Double R Diner, Nadine sits down next to her dearly beloved Mike the Snake Nelson, who is just clearly not having it. He just wants to eat his food in peace.
Yep, and she's like, oh, why don't we enjoy some pies? Like, no, I want pie for myself. Like, in fact, I want 2 pies for myself.
I want 16 cups of coffee.
16, yeah, he wants myself. 2 pies and 16 cups of coffee all for himself. I'm concerned for Snake because I'm pretty sure that
that's a lethal amount of caffeine.
That's a lethal amount of caffeine. That could kill a horse. Like, already, I think the coffee itself, like, is not good for horses.
Yeah.
But imagine if a man was the size of a horse. That would still probably kill them. And yes, apparently that is his plan. It's so specific of a number that I can't imagine he didn't come in with that goal.
Yeah. And he threatens a court order against Nadine. He's pretty serious about this. But that does not deter Nadine, whose love is too strong for this. Mike Nelson, she says, you are the handsomest boy I've ever known. And I would really like it if you and I could go out on a date.
And she leans in for a kiss as like Snake leans
an
back.
Aggressive smooch. An incredibly aggressive smooch.
Like, it was quite the tilt over. They went a full 90 degrees as like Snake tried to lean back.
A full Nelson. I'm going to keep making that joke. And she says, I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't help myself. And Snake just kind of like stares. Deep breathing, trying to collect himself, remember his name, where he is, and what year it is, and all those sort of questions.
Yes.
And this is the second time we had been to the Double R, because earlier in the episode, we got Norma and Ed there as well.
Yeah, Ed's enjoying some food.
Yeah, country music's playing in the background. I feel like it's like Ed's theme, basically, whenever that plays. And he's drinking some, he wants some coffee. Norma's like, you want more coffee? You bet. How's it going? Couldn't be better. He got a smile. He's doing okay with his life, right? Yeah. And he gives Norma $5, and underneath
says, this is for you.
And underneath that $5 is a note.
We need to talk.
We need to talk. Mm-hmm. And sure, they're going to talk. Mm-hmm. Before they can do that, though, Norma is going to do more of her Double R duties when she passes by the soda machines and in typical Hank fashion decides to...
have a conversation.
Yeah, between the soda machines. Now...
Like, I don't think it was soda. I think it was ice cream.
I do...
Machines.
Either way. I do wonder sometimes, is it the director just wanted to show off a cool cinematography thing?
It was a good choice.
Or was it like... specifically for Hank. I do find it funny, and it's very striking visually.
It's striking visually. It is narrowly focusing on both of them. Yeah. It is great.
It's just because nothing else in the episode looks like that it just feels very like, okay, sure, we're doing this now. Yeah. And then the music changes, of course, because it's Hank, super ominously.
Like, do you know who was, like, directing this, like, maybe even visually?
Todd Holland.
Todd Holland. Could you remind me of some episodes he has directed before?
I believe he did one other episode, and that would have been, it was episode 11? Yeah, I just looked at it for sure. I have it in front of me. It was episode 11, which is Laura's Secret Diary. The picture on the Twin Peaks wiki shows Clinton Sternwood making a her kind of face. Looks like a bit like a turtle, like a turtle yawning.
Well, if it was Tom Holland's choice for like trying to get shots like this, I gotta commend that. It's there was just some really good choices, cinematography wise.
This was the one where it opened up with Harry shaking Leland out of a daze and interrogating him at the hospital. So I do wonder if that's the episode where it zoomed out of the hole in the ceiling. Remember that one?
Yes.
Because that would make sense. It was interrogating him about the hospital.
It literally is the one where it's like going out of the wall. That was the episode.
So yeah, he has some interesting directing choices based on that opening of 11 and then also here. I kind of wish he got more opportunities to flourish with those.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would have taken, but I think that those moments are really good when they happen.
Absolutely.
But anyway, this conversation transpires between Hank and Norma, and Norma says she's off to do some errands. And Hank is like, it's a little early for errands, isn't it? And it's like, clearly he's suspicious of her.
Yeah, and she sees that and says, like, let's just count this as a little test.
And then she leaves. I'll do that. So I really enjoy this exchange. I'm always a fan of Hank content. And I do think it's an interesting kind of double meanings between what they are implying and what they're picking up from each other. Norma's not really that dumb. Like, Norma figures out what's going on as well, just as much as Hank does. And we see the payoff of this later when Norma and Ed are talking at House Hurley. And
House Hurley.
Norma is confessing the love that she has, that Ed is the last thing she thinks about when she goes to sleep and the first thing she thinks about when she wakes up. Do you also feel the same way about Ed Hurley? That when you go to bed, you think of Ed Hurley and his gas farm. When you wake up, you think of Ed Hurley and his gas farm.
No, I think that I more have a fondness of Pete Martell in that respects. But talking about Ed, though, there is this point at which, like, they both have something they need to talk about.
Yes.
And Ed just pushes, like, you first. Like, you tell us first. And
he's not good about opening up to his emotions, you know?
Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but this is what she says. And as they get more and more into it, they start really enjoying one another, if you will, as they start making out a lot. Like a complete amount in which we discover, oh yes, this is very, very sweet of a scene. Now,
wow, what is with the voice you're narrating this with?
I cannot imagine any other way for me to narrate any sort of love-making scenes without it.
There was no love-making that was
happening.
There
was love-making that was going into.
Okay, well, I mean, yeah, it can be implied, but it didn't actually happen.
Let the audience imagine for themselves. Anyway.
No, the audience doesn't have to imagine the lovemaking. Audience, if you want to imagine the lovemaking, feel free. If you prefer not to imagine the lovemaking, feel free. Here at the Twin Peaks Wonderful and Strange Logcast, we respect your privacy of mind.
But Norma really needed to discover what was on Ed's mind. And Ed was the one who actually called this meeting out. And Ed just says that just can wait so that they can continue on their bits of fun, if you will.
I just assume they're the same thing.
I don't think it was the same thing, because I think it would have been easy enough to just say, like, when she's like, what did you want to say? It's like, the same thing. Or it's like, I feel the same way. But no, he says later, specifically later.
I think it's because it's the same thing, but in a different way. So I'm thinking Norma chooses to use that moment for physical intimacy with him. And I believe that Ed likely was trying to confess a more emotional intimacy, and he was into the physical at the moment. But I think that it was similarly exchanging love, but I don't think it's... I think that in the situation Ed was in, it's like, would I rather have this right now with Norma or breach into my emotional, like, feelings and talking about those?
Well, one way or another, the invitation to love was opened.
And so was the door later with Donna.
With Donna, yes.
When Donna opened up.
Fancy style Donna.
Donna, okay, we got to have a moment to just swoon, okay? Donna looking the best she's looked in the whole series.
I think that she generally does have a good amount of style.
Okay, I think that normal, like, as far as the outfits they've had her in and, like, her hair and makeup, this is just easily the best she's had.
Absolutely. Like, the first thought that I had when she came in was like, my God, you did something very nice with your hair.
Oh my gosh, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
And then the outfit, we got one of those turtlenecks. Now, I've been a big fan of the turtlenecks the past couple episodes. We're getting a black turtleneck sweater with this like red blazer, very striking, vibrant red.
Black with a striking red, honestly. But I've been a fan of like designs of Carmen Sandiego, and she put on a fancy hat.
And then she's
and
got,
I would
like,
wonder
red,
where in the world is Donna Hayward.
And the red lipstick goes well with the blazer. I think there were some kind of earrings, although they were pretty far away. I couldn't really see what the earrings looked like, but
yeah.
It was a very good look. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see Donna's hair at all angles. Kind of were locked into the side profile there.
It was a good side.
It was a good side. Anyway, so Donna asked about James.
And turns out James had called Ed earlier. He said that he needed hit everything in his savings account sent to him to this bar on like a interstate. And
Ed's
or
just
highway.
Ed's just like, well, that's $12, James.
Yeah, that's $12. With inflation, that's about $23.90.
And then James is like, well, whatever it is,
just send it my way. But Donna intercepts.
Donna's gonna spend. I mean, like, just to make this trip to deliver $12.
Like, it might just be down the road just a little bit. Maybe he's just been driving like a full 10 minutes from Twin Peaks. I don't think it is
because okay, so Evelyn knows about Twin Peaks, but I don't get the sense that she's even been there. Like, it's not like a very close distance.
Look, man, if it's like a little bit over $20 and he's still game to get that money before potentially either driving off or staying there a little longer.
Like, literally, Donna might spend that amount of money driving there and driving back with gas money.
Yep. And meanwhile, if James does get that, he will likely die in the woods from just how far that money will take him.
Yeah. So Donna leaves. Right on cue after Donna leaves, Norma comes out, kisses James. That's not what happened. Kisses Ed and leaves. Ed then turns and just...
Hank is just there.
Just there. He was just there the whole time.
Like, there's not even an approach or anything. It's either like he has some teleportation abilities or he was just like hiding.
I like to believe that there was a waiting line. So like Ed was talking to Norma. He turns around and like... Ed was talking to Donna, and Norma and Hank were just standing next to each other in the hallway, and like Norma got to go first, and then Hank was just there ready up for second place.
I like to think that Hank knew what was going on, so he just hid behind a lampshade the whole time while they were having...
Like, incredibly conspicuously.
But he's completely conspicuous here before he slugs Ed in the face and starts beating him down.
the things we do for love, and then just starts attacking him. And it's interesting because there's no business reason for him to do this.
Yes.
Like, this is something that he's doing that has nothing to do with Jean Reno or Benjamin Horne or any of that sort of stuff, as far as we can tell. So it is pretty interesting that he would do this. I mean, you could argue from a few different points. It could be that he genuinely loves Norma and he's jealous. It could be that he views Norma as like property and it's like, you know, Ed's encroaching on his turf. Or it could just be he's looking for any excuse to slug Ed because those two have a history. We get the sense that at least Hank and Truman have a history with the Bookhouse Boys. We could probably guess by approximation that they do with Ed as well because Ed's in the Bookhouse Boys. They're all kind of know each other.
Yeah.
So
I think it leans more into Norma than anything, but that is an interesting point to bring up. But yeah, I was afraid because not only would this be like one of the bigger fight scenes we see Hank in, last time we saw Hank in a big old tussle, he got his butt beaten down.
And last time we saw Ed in a tussle, he got drugged at a bar and got beat up by Bobby, and that's sad.
Yeah. But luckily, Nadine just came back, and she is ready to brawl. And so that is like 0 for 2 for Hank.
Yeah,
as he
this season has not been kind to Hank's fighting.
Not kind for the muscle as he's been thrown down. I look at this and seeing Nadine's feat of strength, I was afraid that there was going to be a man who died today. I was afraid that he would lose both limbs.
Do we know if he lived?
We don't, because after she throws him through this like... The weird,
like a figurine hive.
Figurine hive because it's got little blocks in it and just tossed right through it.
Yeah.
Hank was supposed to meet up with the drug deal, but was not there, not present. So apparently it was enough damage that we don't know what happened afterwards. Nadine just rushes to Ed's side, kisses him, and maybe they bury the body afterwards.
I don't think he kissed. Did she kiss him?
Oh, yeah, maybe not. She definitely.
There's a lot of kisses in this episode, but that was not one of them.
There's a lot of kisses, but she does lean her head on his floof while rubbing his chest.
Yes. His peck, specifically.
His peck?
His peck. Like.
Okay.
You never heard of pecs before? Like someone's pecs?
Tea time. When you say peck, like a singular peck, like instead of pecs, because pecs would be a chest.
Yeah.
If you just say peck, it makes me think of pecker. So it sounds like you were having her go down south.
Honestly, it was his peck, like pecs, like, you know, his chest muscles.
There you go. Much more appropriate for Twin Peaks.
I think the listener knew what I meant.
Listener, if you believe that Nadine rubbed a man's pecs or pecker, please email us at snakeeyedreams@gmail.com or contact us at our Twitter handle, snakeeyedreams1, the numeral 1, as Kalil likes to point out. But there's certainly probably multiple spots being rubbed along as we get a rubbed certain way by the good old James Evelyn conundrum.
Yeah. So we mentioned James getting his money from his savings account, all $12 of it.
All $12.
While he's waiting, you know, he's being asked by Evelyn to talk about Twin Peaks, why he left. And James says he loved a girl who died. Her name was Laura, and he thought he knew her, but he didn't. He guesses nobody did. He says his life used to make sense. He didn't like it all the time, but it was his life. It felt like he belonged to him. And then Laura died, and now he belongs to something else. And it's like, on one hand, I feel two different emotions here. On one hand, I'm like, all right, so this is one of the fewer moments of introspection we actually get with James. And I feel like it's a bit better than the one that happened with Donna after Maddie's death, where he ran away immediately. Well, it's a little bit better, and it makes sense where he's coming from, that his life has felt spiraling out of control since Laura's death. Okay, I'm figuring it out. But then the other part of me is just like, ugh, that like, this is the way he internalizes the whole death of two people, as it's like two nasty footnotes that are about him, where it's just the way he talks about like, and then someone else died. Like, it just feels like he's not weighing it with anything more than like, woe is me, my life's confusing and unfortunate, rather than like, no, you should be there for Donna because she lost her best friends. Like, it's not just you who lost, James. Why are you running away from it? So part of me judges him. And then the third emotion, I guess, is that this is just such a weak version of kind of what we got with Donna way back at the funeral when she was at the tombstone for Laura. And she was like talking to Laura basically about how all of Laura's problems keep following her and they can't bury her deep enough. That was a way better written and way better performed element of, you know, Donna speaking about how her life has been revolving around Laura even after Laura died. I feel like that's kind of what James is doing here, but just not as interesting.
I think that it is interesting on how there is a parallel with that, because even when Laura died, he still feels like he is very attached to Laura. Like, he still gained an aspect of Laura that has stuck with him. And the fact that he continues to feel powerless about the things around him, he just wants to get away from it. He, in a sense of fight or flight, in a sense of fight or flight, he chooses flight. And right now he continues to run from his problems and he doesn't know where to go. And I think Evelyn can see that a bit in him and maybe can feel a little bit of that herself.
I know, I understand what is going on in the scene, but when he says about how these two friends of his died in like a month, within a month of each other, you know, happening, and Evelyn replies, I know the feeling, James. I know the feeling. It's like, no, you can't respond to someone who's like 18 or 17 being like, yeah, two people very close to me just got murdered recently.
She's not.
And be like, same.
She is not related to the sense of like, these are the things that happened to me, but the emotion of powerlessness.
You don't know that.
It seems to be alluded to out of like everything we've seen from Evelyn.
Be, but it's still, you don't, that's not how you respond to people. Like, your two people got murdered, like, yeah, I know that feeling. And then you start making out.
Again, if it wasn't for like, I know that situation, will be more clear, but it's a feeling. It's more intangible, and she feels that she can connect and read this person. So I think that maybe
they certainly connected their lips.
Maybe she is deluded and thinks that there's much more to relate than others. Maybe she's trying to convince him otherwise to try to get him more attached to her. Or maybe there is that genuine feel of powerlessness in a greater microcosm. We can ask more of that, especially later.
And perhaps she's really just blindfolded to the whole experience.
Yep, as she waltzes around with James going out with champagne and a few glasses, as James reveals, like, hey, I got the car done.
And they toast to handsome strangers and rebuilt engines.
Yep, and there was a point in which Evelyn had just made it clear that she does not want James to go now. She wants him to stay longer. Like, he seems to be ready to continue to move on. But as soon as she says to stay longer, James takes both the champagne glasses, just dumps them. That puts them aside. Just dumps them. And proceeds to go into something that I imagine I might see on the internet.
To be honest with you, okay, one, I don't know what you're doing on the internet, but the second thing is, that looks incredibly uncomfortable. I know it was trying to be sexy, but it just looked, like, uncomfortable, the way they were leaning against the car.
Some people can bend all sorts of ways. Do not judge people on their certain desires. I'm going to
judge James and Evelyn on their desires. I'm definitely going to. For starters, is James 18 yet? We don't even know. He's obviously not old enough to be drinking. We know he's not old enough for that. But as far as is he old enough...
He's old enough to have $12 in his bank.
Is he old enough to consent to sex with someone who is older than 18?
That is a good question.
Because you had a problem with Nadine and Mike.
Do. But the biggest...
You stayed awfully quiet about this situation.
You want to know the biggest difference here, Kalil?
Sure.
The biggest difference.
Yeah.
One is that a person has been put into an environment of just young folk. James literally, like, stopped in a bar and was able to grab a drink. So I don't know about personal bar rules with that.
He wasn't 21.
He was not 21, but it was easy enough to get in and give himself a drink.
Would you give James a drink without looking at his ID?
No. I was big on doing IDs, but that was me personally. So I don't know. I feel that with the scenarios with him have been far more mature, and I would hope that he was around 18. But if you're in a high school and there is a much older woman there who is cheating on her husband as well.
It is pretty weird that, like, Twin Peaks decides at the exact same time to have two parallel storylines about, like, a much older woman pursuing a high school age boy.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
It is.
I don't know what to make of that, beyond that it's just a weird comparison.
Look, buddy, sometimes it is...
Don't call me your buddy.
Listen, pal.
Thank you.
It's going to be the difference of, is it okay for me to do open heart surgery in the surgery room, or is it okay for me to do it in the lobby? Both potentially could be done in both spots. It's just more appropriate for it to be outside of this area. I don't know where I'm going with this. This is still horrifying.
Speaking of horrifying and outside this area, after they're doing their little makeout session against the car very uncomfortably, the camera starts, like, panning outward and going down the road, basically further and further zooming out, till we get this ominous, like, thudding music, and then Malcolm Sloan just kind of, like, materializes next to it, like, it just kind of appears out of the right side of the frame, and he has a weird expression, like, kind of hard to read what he's feeling.
Yeah, he just looks at him and then walks away.
And then we get we get a shot, like a scene, maybe like a 5-minute scene, and then we're back again to Evelyn and James. Like, it's very quick back to back.
We see Evelyn's silhouette putting on a robe. She likely had a slumber party and talked about sweet secrets in the night with James.
Yeah.
And when she walks out, Malcolm Sloan, presumed to be her brother, is also there. And
that's how their baby boy's doing.
Yeah. And that statement is repeated multiple times as Sloan leans in and partakes upon Evelyn's face.
Lucky, lucky, lucky boy. Lucky, lucky, lucky.
Yeah, like that. Word for word. Perfect interpretation.
I imagine
I just played it off the soundboard.
Professor, what are your thoughts on Evelyn, James, and Malcolm Sloan?
Malcolm Sloan as well as Evelyn seem to be more in what I imagine a situation that either them being siblings is a facade, or it may not be, but definitely they've been working against the man of the house for some time. Mm-hmm. And what I'm assuming is that it might be a larger con job, if you will. If there's anything that I imagine what Salone's angle will be, I imagine this is going to be the usual plot point of them doing something to the person in the house, and the intention is putting it on James, but Evelyn feeling used by multiple men will likely lean in towards the James angle or try to get him out of it. That's what I imagine of the future of this greater whole. But yeah, Malcolm Salone will probably do some very interesting things in the future that might lean on Detestable that I look forward to.
Okay, speaking of Detestable and the greater whole of this episode would be the Operation Jean Renault, as I've coined it in my notes. We have a substantial portion of the episode, understandably, dedicated to Cooper and trying to unravel the situation he's in where he's being framed to lose his, basically, rights as an FBI agent due to the machinations of Jean Renault. We open up with Ernie Niles, our good friend, saying that he knows men who could make Jean Renault quiver. But he's hesitating to make this phone call.
Yes.
Now, I can relate to Ernie Niles a bit here. I hate making phone calls like this.
Now, mind you, there's something that I want to bring up in this shot.
Yes.
In the background, not only... Well, there's also in the foreground, there's a plate of donuts that's very much leaning into, like, close to the floor with one of them with a bite out of it.
It's on the edge of that table.
It is on the edge of that table. And in the background, you see the deer's head is knocked over in Truman's office and is just lying on some files, which I don't really take... Like, Truman might be mildly messy. I don't know if he's that messy. So we'll get back to that, though.
Put a pin in it.
Put a pin in it.
And I would say that Ernie is walking on pins and needles right now, sweating up a storm. He says it's like a condition that he has, you know.
Yeah.
He starts talking about Korea and his time in the war, but that gets contradicted later when he talks about Guam. So we really don't know with Ernie if he has any of these sort of war experiences, if that's even something he actually has. What's your feel of that?
What my feel of it is that Ernie will say anything in order to get himself in or out of a situation. So
he even like kind of insinuates like, you know, think about me, think about all of us. Like somehow they're all in danger with this phone call. Like it's for the good of everyone that I don't be put in bad situations. And Cooper is hesitating over a bitten donut, meanwhile, because he notices one of the donuts had a bite out of it. So he grabs a different one, giving Ernie the thumbs up when he finally does make the call. And Ernie kind of repeats the plan to make sure that they're all on the same page, which is a good way, I think, for the audience to get exposition. Because the listener, you know, needs an in for this information, and I think this was a good way to handle it.
Yeah.
Ernie says that they're going to take Jean Renault to Dead Dog Farm, introduce her. Pouring yourself a cup of Joe there, Professor. Very appropriate.
Oh, boy.
Going to introduce her, a.k.a. Referring to Denise, in this case, as the client, in disguise, basically, to Renault, and then take Renault through the buy, complete the transaction, and Ernie's going to get the heck out of there just in time for Harry to join in. At this point, Cooper says, you know, he wishes he could be involved in it, but alas, he has lost the ability to do so, no longer being part of the FBI, at which point Truman decides to deputize Cooper, saying, Bureau's loss is my gain.
Yes. I enjoy this scene deeply. There's still some questions to be put through. Ernie is referring to Denise as her. And while we were watching it, what I imagine the context to be is that when Dennis enters, it is that Denise is disguising herself as her past self, as Dennis.
So, yeah, the weird situation that we enter is past couple episodes has been, what is the show trying to communicate as far as this character's gender identity? Is there a sense in which this character does conform to one gender over the other? And we're leaning on the side that Denise identifies female. And so, interestingly enough, this is the first time we've seen Denise dress in drag. Because Denise is dressing as a man.
Yep.
Cool? Makes sense?
Yes.
And Ernie's just talking about how he's not qualified to do this sort of thing. He's a certified public accountant. He can't possibly do all this. You liking Ernie? You feeling Ernie?
There's only one way I can describe it.
There was a fish in the percolator.
He is a slimy man sitting in the percolator, letting the heat rise, and he is sweating it out, which actually does become a plot point later, because his nervous sweating is driving him mad. I knew, like, Ernie was going to mess things up in general.
Yeah, in case it wasn't obvious enough, because Denise goes as Dennis, thinking that disguise would be less conspicuous, and so it was, because Denise was not the problem. Ernie was sweating so obviously that the Mountie King and Jean Renault clearly could tell something was wrong here.
I love that his name is King and that we can combine it together to be Mountie King. He is the king of the Mounties.
And when Ernie blows the cover, Renault basically pops out. He's got 2 hostages at this point, and he wants safe passage to the border. And Cooper and him are at cross purposes, as he puts it. And he says, we'll kill you if you don't, then everybody dies. So they make an agreement to trade Ernie Niles and Bryson for Agent Cooper. And they do make that trade.
Yes, and again, really nice sentiment with Cooper. He was putting down his gun, and he's willing to risk his life going forward.
Yes.
And as the night goes down and it seems like the standoff is becoming much larger, Cooper is sitting inside the room and it seems that they accepted the trade.
Yes.
And King is just panicking, wondering what to do. And John is just very calmly going well, we have some choice to make. Cooper, do you think that we can run? It's no. Do you think that they will be reasonable for any sort of deal or compromise? No. All right, well then, I suppose we have to surrender, but we have to choose first if we're going to kill Cooper or not. If you kill me, they'll kill you. I know. And this weight of decisions is just a very fantastic moment. And
it makes me sad that Jean Renault is dead. I think Jean Renault's character ends on a very strong note.
Yes.
Because this is a very intriguing moment, and it makes me feel not that they didn't do stuff with him earlier, they did, but we had this weird gap in between the Jean Renault situations where we introduced Jean Renault back when we didn't know Leland was the killer. Then we have Leland as the killer and the episodes that followed, and it kind of paused Jean Renault, where he's still doing things in the background, interacting with Ernie a bit here and there, but we haven't really seen Jean Renault in full swing in quite a while.
Yes, and this is probably the most calm that we've ever seen him, and there's this moment in which he does open up saying that he does blame Cooper for killing his brothers, and Cooper's why? I'm sure that was even questionable. We know that there were fallacies in the argument, but Jean Renault actually has a pretty clear mind when it comes to his vendetta.
If it's okay with you, I just want to read this off.
Go for it.
Because this is one of the most interesting quotes, in my opinion, in season 2.
Go for it. No, please.
Jean Renault said, and I'm not going to attempt the accent, the Canuck dynasty can shame me later about it. My 2 brothers died. I hold you responsible. Before you came here, Twin Peaks was a simple place. My brothers deal dope to the teenagers and the truck drivers. One-Eyed Jacks welcomes businessmen and the tourists. Quiet people lived a quiet life. Then, a pretty girl die, and you arrive, and everything change. My brother Bernard, shot and left to die in the woods. A grieving father, smother my remaining brother with a pillow. Kidnapping, death. Suddenly the quiet people, they're quiet no more. Suddenly the simple dream become the nightmare. So if you die, maybe you'll be the last to die. Maybe you brought the nightmare with you, and maybe the nightmare will die with you. So I want your thoughts, Professor.
First off, I would say that it definitely adds a sympathetic note on Jean Renault. It's where he recognizes that the way that his life has been turned very dramatically around for these key events, and seeing someone as an important figure, such as Cooper, as one to blame, it's a very interesting way for him to process his grief, that he is seeking out retribution for what he has lost, thanks to Cooper. Now, mind you, Twin Peaks was always more than it seemed. I think that's the most notable thing, is that around the early points of Cooper being there was the scene with the Bookhouse Boys, that they were fending off a type of darkness. Maybe the dreamlike quality has a type of darkness itself and left the town blind to the realities of the world. Maybe that sense of reality and how everyone has to now adapt to these sort of troubles, the real nightmare is the reality of the world itself.
There's that human need when the world around us seems very confusing and very broken to believe it's a new phenomenon and to try to pinpoint a blame, a singular blame. And not to get too anything considering the world around us. Because I think sometimes people listen to podcasts to get away from those worries. But there are things that have gone on in the world in recent times. We're saying this in the year of 2020, in case you're listening to the future. And you can look back at the history books to find out what happened that year. In the year 2020, there have been many things that have made people feel like the world has just gone nuts. And I think there's that immediate pressure to think that this is a new phenomenon when the world has always been nuts. And history books will attest to that there's always been injustices and terrible tragedies. And that doesn't excuse the ones that are allowed to happen now. There's that quote that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And I personally believe that we should stand up to those things. But there's this sense in which evil and confusion and destruction always happen, but people want to believe it's a new thing, and they want to blame it on a specific source. So I think there's some kind of human element there to what Renaud was saying, even if we could pick it apart pretty easily and say, well, there was already some pretty shady things happening in Twin Peaks before, and a lot of the things you're mentioning weren't Cooper's fault. Bernard's death is not Cooper's fault.
But at the same time, I think it's very significant that Cooper taking the gun from Denise, who comes up with some supper, if you will,
yes,
in order to distract him and pull up a stocking so that Cooper can quickly grab a gun.
And it shows Denise's versatility as an agent, that Denise can play different roles and pull them off really well. So I think it kind of attests the idea, because your first impulse might be, well, it's really weird for this like serious FBI agent to be Denise, like kind of like maybe poke fun at the idea of like, oh, this just seems like another wacky Twin Peaks character.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's Denise's ability to maneuver around multiple gender identities that allows them to be an excellent agent. And we see that in the multiple different performances, essentially, that Denise puts on in this episode.
And beating down King was an excellent point. But the most significant part, I think, is Cooper shooting Jean Renaud and Jean Renaud being dead afterwards.
Yes.
Like, especially after that talk.
Yeah.
And now Cooper accepting that he has killed Jean Renaud. I'm curious on what they'll do.
You got to imagine that weighs in his psyche.
Yes.
Because he's already blamed himself for tragedies in the past. He's getting multiple different angles because Truman puts enough faith into him to hire him and deputize him. So that's got to be a confidence boost. At the same time, those words of Jean Renaud will ring in, kind of counterbalancing that. And it's at this point around here that we find out it was actually Sheriff Truman's idea to have Denise come in, which I thought was interesting.
It was a very specific idea. Like, if they didn't open the door for the supper, how would they improvise after that?
Yeah, exactly. And again, I guess at this point, Truman's accepted the Cooper's ideas, and we haven't really heard anything of Truman pushing back against Cooper or pushing back against any of this stuff. So
yeah,
I guess he figured, all right, well, more weird stuff's going on. I'll just work with it. He may not understand Denise, but he'll try to work with what he knows about Denise to save Cooper.
Yep, because he gets his same ideas for planning as from Bugs Bunny.
And some bunny must have blown up a bomb in the woods.
What?
Like somebody?
No.
Because we talked about earlier with Leo Johnson with the power outage stuff, that there were some explosions happening, and it was either Leo Johnson or potentially Wyndham Earle.
Potentially.
Right. Because Cooper goes into this room and finds a dead man. We never met the guy before.
Which, by the way, few things I'd like to make clear. They go into the dark area, and Lucy tries to communicate to Truman about how like everything has been going out with the power. Eventually says that she has to get a guy some soup because she feels sorry for him. But Cooper goes off.
Thank you for the subtitles to let that continue, you know?
Yep, I enjoyed it. But he goes in and he sees the body, and Truman joins him. The body, like the hand is strung up by the deer head that we mentioned earlier from a prior scene, strung up and pointing at a chessboard. The episode is called Checkmate, so that's already interesting enough. Didn't seem like a checkmate, but I might have been looking at the board poorly. There were some things interesting about the board. I'll get back to the board in a moment. But the man strung up was very significant, I find. Mm-hmm. He is strung up, his fingers pointing to the board, but his eyes.
Yeah.
He has glasses on, and on one glass, where the frame is completely out, is a clouded over white eye. And on the other one, a much darker eye, one could even just assume that obscuring the eye enough makes it seem black,
Sure.
is behind a broken glass. Mm-hmm. So seeing those eyes there...
I can't possibly understand significance to this. Go on, Professor. Educate.
And then we see the board.
So the duality of black and white.
The duality of black and white,
Perception.
yes. Perception.
Looking at glasses almost as like a reflection or like a seeing looking glass kind of idea.
One being clear and not needing it, possibly either for the sake of one being blind or one seeing beyond sight.
It seems reasonable to believe this is on purpose.
And the other one being completely obscured by the illusions of broken glass that can only lead an eye to many places. Having to face the black side as opposed towards the more strange higher beings of the White Lodge, etc., etc. Yeah. Big themes here.
I'm feeling it.
But on the board, on the white side, we see that there is a couple lost... You see that there's a loss of a knight and a couple lost pawns. And one of the pawns captured something at one point. And on the black end... we see that a queen is out, but the spot where the queen should be is either a rook or a pawn. And now this is completely weird, because there's no openings for that rook to even be there if it is a rook. Usually you can switch a king piece and a rook piece at one point, but the king it would be in a completely wrong spot from that point. And if it's a pawn can't move backwards. It's too obscured by the film to see what piece it necessarily is between that rook or pawn, but none of those moves make sense. So, it makes me concerned on the very strange aspects of this game going on. What rules are allowed to go and what rules can be defied in this game of chess? And what does that mean in the greater narrative?
I know we do a lot of joking on the podcast about encouraging the listeners to contact us for very silly things, but in all seriousness, if there's anyone listening who has actual interesting insight on this particular question, I would love to hear some responses. I do not know anything about chess. My knowledge of chess is worse than the professor's knowledge of popular music. So I would just say that if anyone has any interesting or elucidating thoughts on the chessboard's angle of this, even if it includes spoilers, I'll look at it before the professor, so no worries there. Feel free to email it to us.
Kalil has contact of both the email as well as the Twitter handle.
I have all the power.
And I can see it in small bursts just because I have not caught up on Twin Peaks yet.
When I decide it's appropriate for the professor to see it, I control what he sees. But no, seriously, if you have any thoughts on the chessboard angle, please contact us at snakeeyedreams1 at Twitter, or you can go ahead and email us snakeeyedreams@gmail.com. We do appreciate that. Anything else you want to mention about that chessboard?
Between the chessboard and the man,
bombing.
Again, how much Wyndham Earl was involved with the bombing, unsure. But seeing this person tied up in this certain way definitely implicates him more into the White and Black Lodge, and I look forward to seeing more of Earl in the future.
Do you like the build-up we're getting? We haven't even met the guy. Do you like that we're getting so much before we even meet him?
Have we?
I don't.
Have we not?
Do you know who it is?
That's the question.
Have you met
We don't
anyone...
know the full idea or identity behind Wyndham Earl. We know that there was hear me out.
Okay.
There was a partner that Cooper had in the past that after the loss of this Wyndham Earl person went mad. Mm-hmm. And that's when sort of things were left aside. Now, crazy conspiracy. Wyndham Earl could have been a partner that just disappeared and just suddenly reappeared in his life following these little trials, and could have a very mystical benefit to him.
Sure.
Potentially, he could even be the voice calling out through the cosmos asking for Cooper.
Mm-hmm. I guess all I can say is that we haven't met anyone that Cooper has identified as Wyndham Earl.
But this is the more...
Say it.
I think that this is too crazy for
I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
What if, because of the loss, I don't know Wyndham Earl's ties to the person who was loved, but apparently this man went crazy after the instance. Mm-hmm. What if, Cooper potentially was, or identify towards this window roll position. Could there actually be another Cooper?
Oh.
Or is it like there's another Cooper out there, or they are one and the same?
Do you believe in your interpretation then that we've seen this other Cooper interchangeably? Or we haven't seen this like doppelcoop?
Potentially. The biggest part is that, again, the love of one's life being lost and someone else going insane. If they were both to love the person, then I'd understand, but that hasn't been implied yet, so...
I'm having to keep a serious poker face as you're doing this. This is interesting.
Okay. So, yes, it makes me curious if I can imply the Coop we know might not be the Coop we know. Or even the visions the Coop we've had are one and the same.
Okay. Interesting thoughts.
Interesting thoughts indeed. Again, I feel crazy when I say that.
No, it's good. It's crazy's good.
Okay.
I have one last thing before we get to our ending question. And it's a short section. We often do talk about the Log Lady intro, not every time. But this one does give us a little bit of substance depending on what we interpret it as. Okay. So we get this Log Lady intro where she says that her husband died in a fire. No one can know her sorrow because her love is gone. Her dearest friend is gone, yet she feels him near her. Sometimes she can almost see him. At night, when the wind blows, she thinks of what might have been. Again, she wonders why. When she sees a fire, her anger can be felt rising. This was not a friendly fire. This was not a forest fire. It was a fire in the woods, and that is all she is permitted to say. So there's the two angles we've been working at, right? There's the angle that this is David Lynch grumbling after the Twin Peaks you loved so dearly went off the rails.
Now, mind you, I think that before, like, what seems spiteful before, this area seems far more melancholic.
Yes.
Like, desire of something of what might have been.
And so there's that angle, the meta angle that this is Lynch giving his thoughts about Twin Peaks. That Twin Peaks can be a dog, Twin Peaks can be a husband, Twin Peaks can be whatever the Log Lady talks about, the thing she's talking about is actually Twin Peaks. That's one way you can look at it. The second way is that it is meant to be, like, actual. Like, the Log Lady had a husband who died in a fire.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of the third route, I guess you could take, where it's a metaphor, but not for Twin Peaks itself, but for, like, events in the show.
Okay.
So where do you currently sit as far as this Log Lady intro in your interpretation?
I think I listen to it, and I think that it can take on a double entendre, but I lean more on the inspiration maybe being what could have been. Just like seeing as things continue on, what would have things been like if they were given the choices that David Lynch may have wanted more, or some of the creative crew. Again, I don't know how far that extends.
Sure. At this junction, I'm curious, because you don't know enough to make you don't know enough to make a very informed decision.
I can't wait until, like, the last episode of Twin Peaks is just, like, a fill-in test answer score of, like, everything for
That'd
Twin
be really
Peaks.
funny.
No more questions.
Don't tempt me to do it. Would you rather have the version that David Lynch would have wanted, or do you want the version you have now? Not knowing for sure what Lynch would do, but just going off of what we've talked about in the past. Do you generally side with Lynch where it's like, yeah, they shouldn't have made a reveal the killer. They should have let him have more of the creative control here, blah, 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 blah.
I try my best never to link to melancholy. I think that there's always value in something that comes through, even if it may have altered from the form one may have intended. Oftentimes, I feel like some of the greatest creations come from the sense of working in limitations. And so I don't want to squander myself in melancholy when I can take some of the positive aspects given to me by a work. So even if Twin Peaks just turned into a show in which somehow, like, Benjamin Horne as well as, let's say, Pete Martell dress up as clowns and just, like, stare at the screen and start just quoting poetically, and that was, like, half an hour, I still would prefer that than trying to imagine what could have been.
Do you like this episode?
I think that not only is it nice and heavy on certain styles, cinematography-wise, but it also continues playing on my mind and my curiosities of what is to come. It is the benefit of some of the stronger parts of Season 1 that I am glad to welcome in my viewing.
All right. while we've been doing this podcast, I just turned to my left and I realized that this entire time we've been talking, we've been paused on the screen of Benjamin Horne sitting with Catherine leaning over, about to kiss him. And that feels
standing over a
appropriate.
battlefield.
It feels very appropriate because my wonderful and strange final question for you, Professor, before we say goodbye to our dear listening audience, what was the best kiss in this episode?
Easily? Very easily. Kiss me, General Lee.
All right.
As he goes off to victory.
Then.
It was very appropriate. I wanted to make sure I had the quote right when I told you the kiss.
So why is that the best kiss? Why is this kiss on his list?
Because the other ones can lean in on, like, Snake's confusion. It's a fun little character moment. We can see, like, relationships come closer. Not only is this just a mystery aspect of what Catherine is going to go on about, but just like the quote, "Kiss me, General Lee," will probably stick in my head far longer than it ever should have.
See, I still like the double meaning that it just means kiss me generally. Like, as a general idea, you know, not General Lee.
No,
I can see where they'd get that confused.
No.
I am going to say, and please prepare your spikes and your crucifixes and whatever other tools you wish to use on me. Nadine and Snake is the best kiss in this episode. Because
Snakey wants to be left leave this man alone. He just wants to drink his 16 cups of coffee and eat his 2 slices of pie.
Let the record show I was rudely interrupted, and I was not, interrupting him.
This is not consensual whatsoever.
So I think that the kiss with Catherine leaves me with this feeling of confusion, perhaps, but also we've been here before. We've Benjamin Horne here before. Whereas with Snake and Nadine, it moves forward a plot line very aggressively. And the way in which she kisses so, like, just leaning forward at that 90-degree full Nelson angle we were talking about. I think that it's the most, like, memorable kiss scene because it's so aggressive and because it moves forward that character plot line very well. And then also I really enjoy Snake's reaction afterward of just staring into the void, speechless, and trying to collect his reality again. So I think it's the most memorable and interesting of the kisses in this episode.
So both of us include 2 broken men as 2 redheads lean in and kiss towards them for their own respective reasons.
I don't know if Snake's a broken man. I think maybe after the kiss he felt a little bit broken, but before he just wanted to drink his 16 cups of coffee like a normal person.
Yeah.
So I guess to end this episode, I wish to give some financial advice to our listeners that as long as you have $12 in your savings account, you too can make your dreams come true. And that the winding road of the highway could be your path. For truly, in the wise words of the poet, life is a highway, and I want to ride it all night long.
The professor is not applicable in any of this advice.